Everything's done in slow motion. The garage door opens, the bus drives in, the door shuts, and everything is pitch black. You feel it. It sinks in. This dread feeling. According to former inmate Jack Powers, what happens next is worse than death itself. You're literally buried alive. Left 24/7 in a concrete steel cage. A sarcophagus underground. This is ADX Florence. The Alcatraz of the Rockies. America's only federal Supermax prison. It houses approximately 400 of the nation's most dangerous criminals. Terrorists. Serial killers. Gang leaders. Men who killed guards in other prisons. But here's what most people don't know. The punishment inside these walls isn't just isolation. According to court documents from the landmark Cunningham versus Bureau of Prisons lawsuit filed in 2012, it's a systematic psychological breakdown that begins the moment you arrive and doesn't stop for years. Former Warden Robert Hood testified to this reality. People are there to die. It's a tomb, a mausoleum. Over the next 40 minutes, you'll witness the documented timeline of what happens to a human mind in complete isolation. From the first 24 hours, to the first month, to the breaking point that comes later. Multiple former inmates. Court testimony. Medical records. All pointing to the same truth. But what you'll discover near the end is why some men never leave their cells at all. And why, according to a 2014 Amnesty International investigation, this facility may violate international law. January 10, 1995. ADX Florence officially opened its doors. It was built for one purpose, to contain prisoners who were too dangerous, too violent, or too likely to escape from any other facility in America. The facility sits on 37 acres in Fremont County, Colorado. Part of a larger prison complex that has earned the area a grim nickname, Colorado's correctional capital. Former Federal Bureau of Prisons Director Norman Carlson explained the thinking behind ADX in a 1998 interview. This was designed for criminals desperate enough to murder corrections officers or other inmates in the hopes of being sentenced to death. These are men with absolutely no concern for human life. Each cell is 7 feet by 12 feet. Made entirely of poured reinforced concrete. Everything is concrete. The bed. The desk. The stool. Even the shelf. According to Travis Dusenbury's 2016 testimony to the Marshall Project. It's just the harshest place you've ever seen. Nothing living, not so much as a blade of grass anywhere. The toilet shuts off automatically if blocked to prevent flooding. The shower runs on a timer. For minutes. There's one window. A 4-inch slit positioned so high that in certain units, according to Human Rights Watch investigations from 2007, inmates cannot see anything but a small piece of sky or a brick wall. But the architecture is only the beginning. The real danger at ADX isn't the concrete. It's what happens to your mind when you can't see another human face for weeks at a time. When the only voice you hear is your own. In a moment, you'll hear what former inmates describe as the first signs of breaking. But first, you need to understand the arrival. Let's follow what we know from multiple documented cases. Jack Powers arrived on October 2, 2001. He had assaulted a guard at another prison. In a 2016 interview with A&E Crime Plus Investigation, Powers described the moment. Everything is pitch black. You fall into certain types of despair when you're literally buried alive. Travis Dusenbury arrived that same year. According to his testimony, the first thing that hits you is the silence. At other prisons, even isolated ones, you could see a highway. See the sky. But at ADX, you can't see nothing. You know the minute you get there you won't see any of that, not for years and years. Eric King arrived in 2014 after throwing Molotov cocktails at an empty federal building. He spent nearly 2 years at ADX before his release. In his 2025 book, A Clean Hell, King documented the intake process. New arrivals are placed in what inmates call the boxcar cells, the general population units where you begin your time. You're handed a small bag of basic supplies. The steel door closes. And then, nothing. Most documentaries about ADX end there. They show you the cell and move on. But what happens next, what court records and medical evaluations reveal, is a documented pattern of psychological deterioration that follows a predictable timeline. Week 1 looks different than month 3. Month 3 looks different than year 1. And year 5? According to psychiatric experts who testified in the Cunningham lawsuit, that's when some inmates start doing things no one could imagine. According to testimony from multiple former inmates, there are 3 unwritten rules at ADX. Rules that determine whether you slowly lose your mind or find a way to survive. A 2014 Amnesty International report found that ADX prisoners routinely go days with only a few words spoken to them. Human Rights Watch investigations from 2007 documented that some inmates timed their interactions with staff. One inmate kept a journal. He recorded every conversation. Most lasted under 20 seconds. You need anything? Door closes. According to the lawsuit testimony, some inmates reported going entire weeks without speaking to another human being. Travis Dusenbury explained the effect. I think most people take it for granted that they are human. But when you get to ADX, you realize that being human isn't a birthright. Former inmates describe a phenomenon where days blur into weeks, weeks into months. According to court documents, there are no meaningful distinctions between days. Every morning, the steel door opens. Food slides through the slot. Door closes. Every afternoon, 1 hour of recreation. Alone. In a concrete pen. According to Travis Dusenbury's testimony, the recreation cage allows approximately 10 steps in a straight line. The ceiling is barred. You can see a piece of sky, if you're lucky. Then back to your cell for 23 hours. Repeat. For years. ADX operates on a step-down program. According to Bureau of Prisons policy documents, it's designed as a 2-year process. Phase 1, 1 year of clear conduct in general population. Phase 2, transfer to the Joker unit for 6 months. Phase 3 to 4, movement to less restrictive housing at the adjacent USP Florence High. But here's what the documents don't tell you. According to a prisoner writing from ADX in the 1990s, the system is designed around one word: compliance. Be compliant, lucky, or necessary to fill a quota, and you will receive more privileges. Be non-compliant, unlucky, or present any resistance, and you will be buried in ADX until you're released, or you find an innovative way to beat them or die. So those are the rules. Silence. Compliance. But what happens when you follow all the rules, and your mind still breaks anyway? That's where the Rayal story begins. Here's what most people don't know about ADX. It's not just a prison. According to the class action lawsuit filed in 2012, it's a facility that was systematically violating the constitutional rights of mentally ill inmates for over a decade. 11 prisoners sued the federal government. They alleged that inmates diagnosed with serious mental illnesses were being denied adequate mental health treatment, and that the conditions at ADX were actively making their mental health worse. The lawsuit was led by Harold Cunningham, serving life plus 380 years for murders and robberies. In 1996, during a state trial where he was representing himself, Cunningham suddenly stabbed a witness in open court. After that attack, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, antisocial personality disorder, and borderline intellectual function. When Cunningham arrived at ADX in 2001, something happened that court documents reveal was part of a disturbing pattern. He was taken off his psychiatric medication. According to a 2018 inspection report by the DC Corrections Information Council, there was a documented practice at ADX. Inmates who arrived with diagnoses like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder were being re-diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. Why does that matter? Because according to Bureau of Prisons policy, antisocial personality disorder is not considered amenable to psychiatric intervention, which means no medication, no counseling, no treatment. The lawsuit detailed what happened to Cunningham without his medication. His behavior predictably worsened. He was cited for possessing weapons, assaulting corrections officers, refusing to leave his cell. For this, he spent 5 years in even more restrictive conditions within the control unit. His treatment, workbooks, and programs through his television. Then there's John J. Powers. Court documents describe him as a prisoner with a history of mental illness who was transferred to ADX in 2001 after escaping from a medium-security prison. The Cunningham lawsuit details what happened next. Powers was repeatedly transferred to the Federal Medical Facility in Springfield, Missouri for psychiatric evaluation after incidents of self-harm. Each time, he was stabilized with medication, then returned to ADX's control unit, where the medication was stopped. Powers later wrote about his experience. He described cutting off his earlobes, chewing through a finger. According to a New York Times investigation, he smashed his head open trying to inject his brain with bacteria-laden fluid. In his own words to A&E Crime Plus investigation, "I didn't think I was ever gonna come out of there alive. I went through the flames. I went to the edge of the pits." By 2012, the evidence was overwhelming. But here's what makes this case extraordinary: the government didn't just fight it. They tried to dismiss it 14 separate times. What Judge Richard Match did next shocked everyone. And it led to changes that are still being implemented today. But we'll come back to that. Let's talk about what actually happens to the human mind in isolation. Not theory. Documented medical evidence. Travis Dusenbury described the first week. You're just shut off from the world. You feel it. According to psychiatric research cited in the Amnesty International report, the effects of solitary confinement can begin within days, if not hours. Dr. Stuart Gracian, who testified in multiple solitary confinement cases, described a condition in 1993 called SHU syndrome. Early symptoms: anxiety, panic attacks, difficulty concentrating. According to testimony from multiple former inmates, the first few months are when you develop coping mechanisms. Some men pace their cells. Exactly 7 feet, turn, 7 feet back. Travis Dusenbury explained what he did. "I would read, work out. But writing was hard because the pens they sell you are expensive and small, designed so you can't use them as weapons." Others talked to themselves. Some yelled through air vents to communicate with inmates in other cells. According to Human Rights Watch's 2007 investigation, this limited contact through vents and during the 1-hour recreation period was, for many inmates, the only human interaction they had. The 2014 Amnesty International report documented symptoms that appear after extended isolation: depression, insomnia, hypertension, extreme paranoia. And then the hallucinations begin. One prisoner named Jesse Wilson wrote to Solitary Watch after listening to testimony from the head of the Bureau of Prisons claiming there were no mentally ill inmates at ADX. Wilson wrote, "I heard the head of the BOP in Congress saying they do not have insane inmates housed here. This is what should be thought of as a lie. I have not slept in weeks due to these non-existing inmates beating on the walls and hollering all night." In September 2013, according to the Amnesty report, a prisoner with a history of mental illness hanged himself in his cell after reportedly spending more than a decade at ADX with only intermittent mental health care. Former Warden Robert Hood, who oversaw ADX from 2002 to 2005, spent more than 20 years with the Federal Bureau of Prisons. He told A&E Crime Plus investigation what he witnessed. "It's a tomb. A mausoleum. People are there to die." Hood described himself as a warden who liked to walk around and believes inmates should have access to each other within reason. But even he recognized what ADX was designed to do. Court documents from the Cunningham lawsuit included testimony about what happens in the years of isolation. Inmates interminably wail, scream, and bang on the walls of their cells. Some mutilate their bodies with razors, shards of glass, writing utensils, whatever objects they can obtain. Some swallow razor blades, nail clippers, parts of radios and televisions, broken glass. Others carry on delusional conversations with voices in their heads, oblivious to reality. One inmate, Richie Hill, according to court records, spent 6 years languishing in his own feces at ADX before being transferred. Travis Dusenbury spent 10 years at ADX. He was finally released in 2011. But the middle years were the hardest. In his testimony to the Marshall Project, he described struggling with severe insomnia for years. "At first, they would try to catch me sleeping because they didn't believe me. They thought I just wanted the meds. That went on for years. Finally, they gave him medication. But they didn't care if it was the right meds. They didn't care if the meds were working. They just cared that they were giving it to me. There was no checking on me to see if I could sleep, which I still couldn't. After 5 years, Dusenbury was accepted into the step-down program, which was next to where they had a larger yard so you could see the sky. You were with 2 to 7 people at a time, instead of just yourself. He described the moment he was finally around other people. I'm a people person. Before long, I was hugging other inmates. The guards were all saying, damn, usually motherfuckers don't want to go near other motherfuckers after they've been inside. 5 years of isolation had nearly broken him. But Dusenbury was one of the lucky ones. Because there's a unit within ADX where conditions are even worse. Where inmates designated as terrorism threats by the Department of Justice are held under special administrative measures. It's called H Unit. And according to investigations from 2018, what happens there goes beyond isolation. Within ADX Florence, there is a unit within the unit. The Special Security Unit, known as H Unit. This is where the government sends inmates deemed so dangerous that even at ADX, they require additional restrictions. According to a 2018 investigation by Denver Westward, only certain inmates have been publicly confirmed in H Unit. Ramzi Youssef, 1993 World Trade Center bomber. Zacarias Moussaoui, 9/11 conspirator. Umar Farouk Abdelmutalal, the underwear bomber. Richard Reed, the shoe bomber. And until his transfer to another facility, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. The cells in H Unit are 75 square feet. Slightly smaller than standard ADX cells because they don't have showers. Inmates are escorted to showers several days a week. Unless there's a lockdown. Or staffing issues. Which, according to inmate testimony, happens frequently. Court records describe the experience of one H Unit inmate who kept a journal of his time there. Recreation was alone in a cage. About 5 steps wide, 10 steps long. There was a pull-up bar. Sometimes a soccer ball, usually flat. But when recreation didn't happen for several days in a row, the inmate described feeling his chest constrict. His thoughts fog over. When told he could go outside again, he felt relief like a dog seeing a leash. He began timing every interaction with staff. Most lasted under 20 seconds. Entire days went by with no words at all. In 2018, Zacarias Moussaoui, serving 6 life sentences for his role in the 9/11 conspiracy, filed handwritten petitions in federal courts. According to Associated Press reports, he described suffering psychological torture in total isolation. He sought relief from prison guidelines that keep me in total isolation without access to a lawyer to break me psychologically. His communications with the outside world were limited to legal team and immediate family. All conversations monitored. Visits conducted through glass windows with telephones. According to CNN's investigation of ADX, Moussaoui's level of freedom was determined not by prison staff but by the Justice Department and the agencies that investigated and prosecuted him. In H Unit, even protests are controlled. According to Amnesty International's investigation, between 2001 and 2014, there were upwards of 900 documented force feedings at ADX. When inmates refuse to eat, guards shackle them and take them to medical. Medical officers weigh them, assess their condition, offer a nutritional supplement to drink voluntarily. If refused, inmates are fully restrained. A tube is inserted through the nose, and they are fed whether they want it or not. This happens every single day if the prison deems it necessary. By 2012, the evidence was undeniable. ADX wasn't just isolating dangerous criminals. According to court testimony, it was driving men insane, and then keeping them there anyway. What happened next in the lawsuit changed everything. Remember Harold Cunningham, the lead plaintiff in the 2012 lawsuit. For over 3 years, his legal team, led by partner Ed Arrow from the law firm Arnold & Porter, gathered evidence. Court documents, medical records, testimony from inmates, psychologists, and prison staff. The lawsuit wasn't just another prisoner complaint. According to reporting from the Marshall Project, It was remarkable for both the level of detail alleged and the scope of the problem described. Prior to this case, no fewer than 14 lawsuits had been filed by ADX inmates, all making similar claims, all dismissed by federal judges before trial. But this time was different. U.S. District Judge Richard Match, a veteran jurist, refused an early request by federal lawyers to dismiss the case. He allowed the plaintiffs and their attorneys to investigate conditions at ADX. On December 29, 2016, after years of litigation and private discussions between prison officials, Department of Justice lawyers, and attorneys for the inmates, the parties reached a comprehensive settlement. According to inspection reports, Judge Match approved terms that represented one of the most significant victories in the history of litigation against the Bureau of Prisons. The major terms included creation of new policies governing mental health diagnosis, treatment, suicide prevention, and conditions that could create or exacerbate mental illness. 2 secure mental health units, one at USP Atlanta, one at USP Allenwood, plus a new stages program at USP Florence High specifically designed for mentally ill inmates from ADX. Private telepsychiatry areas in all units at Florence ADX for confidential mental health counseling. Enhanced screening before inmates are sent to ADX to identify serious mental illness. Mandatory medication for inmates who need it, reversing the previous policy of withholding psychiatric drugs. And perhaps most importantly, transfer of severely mentally ill inmates to step-down units designed for mental health treatment at other prisons. According to the DC Corrections Information Council's 2018 inspection report, many of the original plaintiffs had already been transferred to more appropriate facilities by the time of the settlement. Men like Jonathan Francisco, who was so severely mentally ill that the BOP transferred him in 2013. Men like Richie Hill, who had spent 6 years languishing in his own feces. But they were replaced by other ADX inmates with similar conditions. Because even with the settlement, according to investigations, ADX continues to house mentally ill prisoners. The 2018 inspection noted that psychology services was still understaffed. The facility had gone through 3 psychiatrists in 2 years. High turnover. Difficulty gaining qualified mental health staff. The remote location of ADX makes recruitment nearly impossible. The settlement changed policies. But it didn't change the fundamental question. Should a facility like ADX exist at all? Because here's what investigations have found. The psychological damage doesn't just go away when inmates leave. In 2019, Vice News investigated what happens to inmates after they're released from ADX. The findings were disturbing. Despite multiple warnings about the psychological state of ADX inmates, the Bureau of Prisons was sending severely mentally ill prisoners home with virtually no preparation or safety net. Ernest Schaefer spent 10 years in ADX for assaulting guards at another prison. He had documented mental illness. When he was released, he received minimal transitional support. Less than a year later, in 2015, according to court records, he nearly beat 2 women to death with a shovel handle in Florida. He's now serving a 30-year sentence in Florida's state prison system. Antoine Bruce spent approximately 7 years in ADX. When he was released to Washington, D.C. in October 2018, he was free for less than 6 months. Then, according to police reports, he was arrested for allegedly attacking a man with a knife outside a homeless shelter. Not everyone who leaves ADX commits violence. Ismail Royer was convicted after September 11 for helping friends reach a militant training camp in Kashmir. He was released in 2016. Now he works for a think tank in Washington, D.C., promoting peace between religions. But his testimony about the step-down program is revealing. He told Vice that he witnessed 2 attempted murders in the step-down unit. Just the most brutal things I've ever seen in prison. Every time cell doors would open, he was prepared to fight for his life. You'd have anxiety about being asleep. It was just constant fear of your life. When I got there, the first thing one guy told me was, "Not every day is promised." In May 2013, the Government Accountability Office released a report on ADX and solitary confinement. According to their findings, federal officials hadn't studied how long-term segregation affects those subject to it, how much it actually costs, or the extent to which it achieves its stated purpose to protect inmates, staff, and the general public. But they did provide a cost estimate, $78,000 per year, per person, to incarcerate them in what the report called psychologically devastating conditions. According to testimony cited in Solitary Watch, that's approximately double the cost of a standard maximum security facility. So that's the financial cost. But here's what almost no one talks about. There are men who have been at ADX for over 20 years. Men who followed every rule. Who had clean conduct records for decades. And they're still there. Not because they're dangerous, but because of what they did before they ever arrived. Thomas Silverstein was a member of the Aryan Brotherhood who killed a prison guard in 1983. For that crime, he received what's known as a no human contact order from the director of the Bureau of Prisons. He was transferred to ADX when it opened in 1995. For nearly 3 years between 2005 and 2008, according to court documents, he was held on Range 13, a special 4-cell wing within the special housing unit reserved for inmates in need of the tightest control. In Range 13, the window at the top of each cell is positioned so high that inmates cannot see outside. Cameras positioned on cells 24 hours a day. According to his lawsuit, Silverstein had maintained a clean conduct record for over 2 decades. No violence. No infractions. Yet he was kept in conditions his lawyers described as unconstitutional. In 2015, the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals rejected parts of his lawsuit, ruling that while the no-window cells were harsh, they did not violate constitutional protections because the slit windows still provided natural light. Thomas Silverstein died at ADX in 2019. He spent 36 years in solitary confinement. The last 24 years at ADX Florence. He never had physical contact with another human being during that time. Then there's Ramzi Youssef, the mastermind of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. He's been at ADX since 2005, held in H-Unit under special administrative measures. According to CNN investigations, Youssef has spent nearly 2 decades in near-total isolation. No human contact except through slot-in door. No communication with other inmates. Visits only through glass partition. All monitored. All controlled. He will never leave ADX alive. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, arrived at ADX in 1998. He killed 3 people and injured 23 others with mail bombs over nearly 2 decades. According to reporting, Kaczynski spent his days in his cell reading, writing letters, and working on legal appeals. He had no television. By choice. In a 2012 interview conducted through Mail with Time magazine, he described his life. 8 hours a day I'm allowed to walk around outside in a tiny concrete area called an exercise yard. Apart from that, I sit in my cell reading or writing most of the time. He died in 2023 at the age of 81. Spent 25 years in that cell. These men, Silverstein, Youssef, Kaczynski, they're never getting out. Their crimes justified their placement at ADX. But here's what investigations have revealed about the broader population. Not everyone at ADX is a terrorist or serial killer. Some arrived for prison infractions, gang affiliations, escape attempts. And according to lawyers who fought ADX cases, getting out is nearly impossible. Even when you've followed every single rule. Remember the step-down program? The 2-year pathway to freedom from ADX? According to investigations by Solitary Watch, here's the reality. Between 2006 and 2014, fewer than 25% of inmates completed the program successfully. Most were recycled back to general population for minor infractions. Starting the entire process over again. Jack Powers spent 10 years at ADX. He was finally released to a medium-security prison in 2011. In his interview with A&E Crime Plus Investigation, he described what it took. Perfect behavior for years. No write-ups. No infractions. Participation in limited programming through his television. Constant vigilance. Constant fear of being sent back to the control unit. Even then, he describes leaving ADX as a miracle. I didn't think I was ever gonna come out of there alive. Eric King arrived at ADX in 2014 for throwing Molotov cocktails at an empty federal building as a political protest. He spent nearly 2 years there. In his 2025 book, he described the arbitrariness of the system. Inmates who had been there 15, 20, even 25 years with no clear path out. Some had decades-old infractions keeping them from the step-down program. Others simply weren't politically convenient to release. King wrote about the psychological games. Guards would hint that someone might be moving to the step-down soon. Then nothing would happen. For months. Sometimes years. The false hope, according to his testimony, was worse than no hope at all. So that's the system. Arbitrary. Punitive. Designed not to rehabilitate but to bury. But here's the question almost no one asks. What happens to the guards who work there? Because according to investigations, ADX doesn't just break inmates. Robert Hood served as warden of ADX from 2002 to 2005. He spent more than 20 years with the Federal Bureau of Prisons. He'd seen maximum security facilities across the country. But ADX was different. In his interview with A&E Crime Plus Investigation, Hood admitted something few wardens ever would. I don't think you can run that place without having it affect you. It's a tomb. It's designed to be that way. And when you work in a tomb, you become part of it. According to the 2018 DC Corrections Information Council Inspection Report, ADX faces constant staffing challenges. High turnover. Difficulty recruiting qualified personnel. The remote location makes it nearly impossible to attract mental health professionals. The facility had gone through 3 psychiatrists in 2 years at the time of the inspection. Psychology services remained understaffed despite the Cunningham settlement requiring enhanced mental health care. Former guards who've spoken anonymously describe the effect of working in complete silence. Walking past cells where men scream for hours. Where the smell of human waste permeates entire ranges. Where inmates bang on walls all night, every night, for years. One former guard told Solitary Watch, "You go home and you can still hear it. The banging. The screaming. It doesn't leave you." So that's the human cost. For inmates. For staff. For families who receive monitored phone calls and glass partition visits for decades. But here's the final question. The one that makes this story matter beyond one prison in Colorado. Does ADX actually work? Does extreme isolation make us safer? Or is it creating something worse? In 2014, Amnesty International released a comprehensive report on ADX Florence. Their conclusion was unequivocal. The conditions at ADX Florence violate the prohibition against cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment under international law. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture has stated that solitary confinement lasting more than 15 days can constitute torture. At ADX, inmates routinely spend years in isolation. Some spend decades. Here's the data the Bureau of Prisons doesn't want to talk about. According to Vice News investigations, inmates released directly from ADX to the streets have significantly higher rates of reoffense than those released through transitional programs. Ernest Schaefer, 10 years at ADX. Violent assault within 1 year of release. Antoine Bruce, 7 years at ADX. Violent assault within 6 months of release. The 2013 Government Accountability Office report found no evidence that extreme isolation achieves its stated purpose of protecting public safety. No studies. No data. No proof. Just a $78,000 per year assumption that locking men in concrete boxes makes the world safer. Remember Robert Hood, the former warden who called ADX a tomb? Here's what he said about the facility's purpose. "I believe the use of solitary confinement in certain cases is torture. We need to be clear that we're crossing a line here. We're creating people who are more damaged when they leave than when they came in." And Hood wasn't some liberal activist. He was a career Bureau of Prisons official who believed in punishment for criminals. But even he recognized what ADX had become. Here's what investigations have revealed. ADX Florence was designed to house approximately 400 to 500 of the most dangerous criminals in federal custody. But according to court documents and journalist investigations, a significant portion of the population consists of Men with serious mental illness who've been repeatedly recycled through the system. Gang members sent there for prison infractions, not terrorism or murder. Inmates who've spent decades with clean records but can't advance through the step-down program. The Center for Constitutional Rights has called ADX a clean version of hell. Amnesty International calls it torture. Former inmates call it a tomb. But the Bureau of Prisons calls it necessary. As of 2025, ADX Florence continues to operate. The Cunningham settlement brought some reforms: better mental health screening, new treatment programs, transfers of the most severely ill. But the fundamental structure remains unchanged. Approximately 400 men still spend 23 hours a day in 7 by 12-foot concrete cells. Most will spend years there. Some will die there. And according to the latest Bureau of Prisons data, the population keeps growing. But here's what almost no one knows: the final twist that makes this entire story even darker. According to investigations by the Columbia Human Rights Law Review in 2012, ADX Florence was designed based on a model. That model was the federal prison in Marion, Illinois, which was designed based on research into sensory deprivation. Research conducted in the 1950s and 60s on prisoners without their consent. The very foundation of ADX, the architecture, the isolation protocols, the calculated removal of human contact, comes from experiments that would be illegal today. Studies that proved human beings deteriorate psychologically when deprived of stimulation. And the federal government took that research and built a prison around it. Not to rehabilitate, not even just to punish, but to systematically break the human mind. That's the real story of ADX Florence. Not that it's harsh, not that it's controversial, but that it was designed from the very beginning to do exactly what inmates, guards, wardens, and investigators all say it does: destroy people. And it's still operating today. ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies, where approximately 400 men live in conditions that international human rights organizations call torture, where mentally ill inmates cycle through years of untreated psychosis, where gang members sent for prison infractions spend decades in isolation, where terrorists and serial killers die without ever touching another human being. The Cunningham lawsuit brought reforms: better mental health care, new treatment programs, transfers for the most severely ill. But the system remains. Because here's the truth: as long as ADX exists, there will be men inside who are being psychologically destroyed. Some deserve punishment for their crimes. Absolutely. But the question isn't whether they deserve punishment. The question is, what kind of society builds a tomb for the living? If this documentary opened your eyes to the reality of America's prison system, there's more you need to see. Watch our investigation into California's Pelican Bay State Prison, where the security housing unit pioneered the solitary confinement techniques later adopted by ADX. Or dive into the story of Angola Prison in Louisiana, the largest maximum security prison in the United States, where men serve life sentences on a former slave plantation. These aren't just prisons. They're systems designed to break people. And every American needs to understand what's being done in their name. Thanks for watching. And remember, the walls keep us from seeing what happens inside. But ignorance is a choice.